145. Again, we're learning Basi Lagani, Tafshin Chaf Hey, 1965, the Rebbe's first review of chapter 15. We started our review a couple days ago. We began just giving us basically the rundown on what the whole story is about. As I told you, the Rebbe gives an introduction every year that he said the Maimer, reviewing the Maimer up to the chapter that he's about to delve into. So we spoke about the idea of the avoda of hiskafi and hishapcha, transformation, subjugation, in order to make a mishkan for Hashem. The idea is that when we have hiskafia, essentially we trigger this reality of bringing forth the sovev light, this infinite light, which is beyond all the worlds equally. And we trigger this and we reveal this when we have hiskafia, when we do Torah mitzvahs. So he says when this is accomplished, it's what we call shtus de kedusha. We said that the Mishkan is made out of atzei shitim. We're actually covering this chapter in our morning class right now. And the reason why it's called atzei shitim is because the word shtus means to veer and to be in a state of folly, something which is not rational. And the idea is that using our nefesh bahamis, right, which is a non-rational veering entity, when you use it for kedusha, specifically when you use it for kedusha, is when you can bring the Shekhinah to dwell. And that's why the Mishkan, which was the place where God dwelled in the world, singularly, it was made out of shtus. Right? It was made out of atzei shitim, because only by transforming your nefesh bahamis and using the shtus of this world for God is that the singular way to bring God into this world. And when we do this, we're called tzivos Hashem. That's what we ended with last time. The process of doing this, like becoming like a legion or an army, just like someone who's in a soldier, he doesn't necessarily do everything because it makes sense. He has kabbalas ol, and he's willing to give his life for the cause, even if it comes down to it. All that type of behavior is a shtus, which doesn't really go according to logic. And yet, when we follow this path, we have this new title called tzivos Hashem, the legions of Hashem. Let's go on. Starting on page 145, the second paragraph down. Umamshich levaer. He now goes on and he jumps to chapter 11. He's going to explain what's going on in chapter 11. He's picking us up to chapter 15. He goes to continue to explain ba'omek yoser in a deeper way. Ma Yisrael nikraim b'shem tzivos Hashem. Why are we called in this name tzivos Hashem? She'inyan hatzava hu sha'al yadam yochlu latzeis b'milchama v'lenatzeach ba. Because why are we called suddenly soldiers? Because through this legion, this army, we're able to go out to war and to have what's called victory. Right? He gets into a whole long explanation of the midah of netzach, right? Which I mentioned at the Verbring and Hey Tevis, that Tzfas is called by the midah of netzach in a very famous sefer Chesed LaAvram, written by Avram Azulai, the student of the Arizal. He writes there, and the Rebbe quotes him often when he speaks about Tzfat, that in this city resides the midah of netzach, amongst a few other things like the midah of keser. But the idea is that what is this idea of netzach? Is to win, right? To pashit, have an opponent and overcome him. So why are we called tzivos Hashem? It's specifically when we get geared up to have an opponent, the nefesh bahamis, and specifically to overcome it, not to fight against it, but to beat it, right? To win, to go out to war and get this title of tzivos Hashem is because we've overcome an opponent and sort of have this netzach quality. We see in the kingdom of earth, that when it comes to victory, it, so to speak, touches the king more than any other thing. To the point, how do you see, you can see how important victory is to a king. And why does he bring a king? Because a king has to have this midah of netzach more than a regular person. Because essentially, if the king goes down, then you lose the whole country. Everything's lost. So the definition of a king is that he doesn't lose and he never loses. If he loses, he's not a king and there's no kingdom. Another regular person could also develop his midah of netzach, which means he'll always win. But for a king, if you're put in a position where you're a king, your Iker Inyan is your midah of netzach because you cannot ever lose. Otherwise, you're not a king. So his definition of his being depends upon the fact that he's never going to be taken over. He'll always win. It's kind of like the Jews, right? At the end of the day, they can beat us up a little bit here and there, but they never win. If they won, we wouldn't be here. As simple as that. The Jews always win in every war we ever fought, because otherwise we wouldn't be here. So the idea is like winning is and that's also why the word netzach has another meaning besides victory. What does netzach also mean?
Eternity.
Eternity, right? Because if you always win, you're eternal, right? So, but the eternality comes together with never losing. So the meaning of netzach, again, is not just to fight. It's to fight and win. And therefore, someone who's a serious competitor, he's like on another level with his netzach. Like you hear about, sports greats and so forth. Like they're drunk on competition. They'll compete over everything they possibly can. It's like in their nature that they have to take up with somebody and beat them. So this is, by a king, we see the intense level of his netzach, because how do you see it? Because all the treasures that have been stockpiled, that he's stockpiled himself over his own conquests, and also all the stockpile of treasures that he's kept in the kingdom for generations, Shem Yekarim Kol Kach, they're such precious, this treasure house of the king that every nation possesses. Ad shafilu ein marim osam. The point is, there's certain treasures that you don't even show them to anyone. They're behind closed doors, they're locked in vaults, and you can't go in. There's such fantastic treasures that you're not even allowed to see them. You're not allowed to see them. Certainly, you're not allowed to just use them and peruse around. And yet, with all that said and done, when it comes to the point of winning a war, not only does he open his treasure house, and not only does he use the treasures for the sake of winning this war, but the word mebazbez is a unique word which means to like flaunt and like carelessly throw them out like it's going out of business. Like you're going to tap the treasury and just like spend billions, everything you have, because what is America if we lose World War II? Right? So we're going to tap every woman. The whole women started working because of World War II. Before that, women didn't work. We're going to say, like, now women work. Say anything we're going to pull out of our treasure house, because if you lose, then you're going to have chas v'shalom, a Nazi flag over you. Yamach shemam. You can't lose. So therefore, there's no end in sight of the type of research that you will bring out. And he doesn't say, I don't think here, but in the mimer, the original, he says he'll even die for the cause, right? The king, at the end of the day, he'll put his very body and life on the line, and he'll put not only his treasures, and the treasures that no one's ever seen before, and use them flauntingly, but he'll even put his body and his cause and his kingdom is more important than his own life, right? And again, what pulls this out of a person? Not chesed, not gevura, netzach. Like when you have suddenly you have this crazy meat of netzach, you will literally do anything and give your life in order to allow it to come out. And that's why the whole mimer, quite frankly, Basi is about netzach, because it's bringing us to like this impassioned frenzy, telling us that we're at the end of days, and the war depends on us, and therefore we all have to sort of bring our netzach levels into insanity in order to win the final game of Galus. And that's what he says here. What does the king do with these treasures that he's flaunting? First, he transfers them first to the Pekudi Achayil, means like the generals, right? So first thing you do is you give all your fancy planes to the captains and the generals. But what did the captains and the generals do with them? Bishvil Anshe Achayil. They give them into the hands of 18-year-old kids. Right? It's no joke. A guy can be flying around in like a $6 billion airplane, and he's just like he doesn't even have wet behind the ears, right? Because at the end of the day, the purpose of all this wealth and majesty is to get into the hands of these simple warriors who are the ones on the front lines that have to fight this battle. And they're called Tzivos Hashem. Now we understand where we got this name from. This is basically when we gained this because before this exodus of Egypt, we were a nation, but we weren't called the legions and the warriors of Hashem, because we hadn't yet overcome and won the battle of the Galus. Right? And all this comes out, Kedei shinatzchu b'milchama, so it will win the war. And again, when you have the Netzach, I'm not sure if he gets into it so far over here. We're going to read the whole mimer slowly and nicely and gently. As I told you, I'm kind of rushing to get to the chapter of this year a little bit. But over there he explains that just like Netzach has two meanings, which is victory and eternality, you tap into the eternal soul of the Jew, which is indestructible, and basically has infinite powers, when you pull out this meat of Netzach. So the whole purpose of getting to this situation is because Netzach has an immediate tap into the Pnimius of Keser. And wouldn't you know it, in that book that I mentioned to you before about Chesed L'Avraham, that describes the Midah of Sfas, it says that the Midah of Sfas, it dwells here Netzach and, remember what I said to you? Keser. They're not random two spheres that have nothing to do with each other. They're the same thing. Because the Keser is the Pnimius HaKeser, is essentially your eternal Yechida. And the way to get it to come out is when you have to win. If you don't have to win, you're not going to push yourself to the ultimate extreme and show your infinity and your eternality. But when you overcome, the Netzach is the one sphera that taps you into your Pnimius HaKeser, and so they're aligned with each other. We live in a special place. L'chaim. Lahavin inyan ha'otzer lamayla makdim. Now he goes on to chapter 12. He says, in order to understand what is this treasure house in the mashal, right? Because at the end of the day, this is an analogy for God. What is God's treasure house? We're Hashem's soldiers, right? And the Rebbes are Hashem's generals. The king is God. And what is God's treasure house? Exactly. What's that? We're flaunting it right now. Masha Kasuv, Bezor b'Tekuni Zohar, as it says, let's first preface what it says in the Zohar and the Tekuni Zohar, where it describes Or Ein Sof, right? What is the description of the Or Ein Sof? And it actually says, it has a description, it's called Lamayla Adin Kates v'Lamata Adin Tachlis. This a very, very deep and wondrous set of sentence, as we're going to delve into. Basically, from this point on in the mind, we're going to talk about nothing else. And what does it mean that the Or Ein Sof is Lamayla Adin Kates? It goes infinitely high, and Lamata Adin Tachlis is infinitely low. And this is what the definition of the Or Ein Sof is, according to the Zohar. And he continues after this in chapter 17. So he's kind of giving us an overview of the whole idea here. That when it comes down to it, first we have to understand what the Or Ein Sof, which is Lamat Adin Tachlis, which we're going to get into presently. In order to understand that there's something even higher than the aspect of the Or Ein Sof, which is Lamata Adin Tachlis, which is the part which is Lamayla Adin Kates. And this is something even more extraordinary, which we're going to get into. At the end of the day, when he talks about this idea of the king being willing to be mevazbez his otzros, what is the otzar? It's the aspect of the Or Ein Sof which is called Lamayla Adin Kates. It's the part of the light that goes infinitely high. That's specifically what it means. And Hashem is going to give out the otzar. And again, like we said before, there's keser and there's keser, right? There's something called chitzonius HaKeser and pnimius HaKeser. So if we're going to go into the Or Ein Sof, there's an aspect of it which is, so to speak, coming down, which we could link into sort of, yes, you reach into your keser, but Netzach reaches into the pnimius of the keser, the highest possible thing that there is to describe. That's this source of this Netzach, this eternality, and that's called the Otzar HaElyon. This is called the king's treasure house, and specifically, it's the aspect of the Or Ein Sof that goes Lamayla Adin Kates. V'kedei lahavin b'harchava, turning the page, in order to understand this at great length, umkus godel ha'inyan, umkus godel ha'inyan de lamayla adin kates, in the depth of the greatness of the concept of what it means to be infinitely high. Mivar besif makodmim, he first explains by way of sort of negation, because you can't even start off by talking about what this light is. You have to start talking about what the other light is, the lower light, and then from there you can sort of make out what you think maybe is the higher light. So in the previous chapters, before chapter 17, where he sort of spills the beans and tells us that the Otzar is the higher light, in chapters, if you see at the bottom, chapters 13 and on, he starts to explain Godel Indian de la Mata Adin Tachlis. He starts to explain what's so great about the Or Ein Sof that goes below, that goes low, and it goes infinitely low. From there, we'll get a better picture of what's called infinitely high. And he says, Hu bebechinas hispashtus bebechinas Ein Sof ad lamata mata. So, as its name, the Or Ein Sof, this lamata mata adin tachlis, the idea is that it expresses itself in an Ein Sof way to the lowest of all possible places. Uba'ofen shebakol makom shenimshach. Okay, but that's not such a chiddush. What's the chiddush? Is that when this Or Ein Sof, which is able to spread itself to the lowest places, when it comes down to all these places, it comes down b'kol makom in a way shenimshach gam lamata mata, that even when it finds itself in the lowest of all possible places, hari ba'ofen shel Ein Sof, it remains Ein Sof. Which basically means that no matter where you're going to go, the most pushed off, like darkest corner of reality, in that very place, the Or Ein Sof, which is infinite and knows no boundaries, is going to find its way right there in its Ein Sof quality, and nothing can stop the Or Ein Sof from being in every single possible place. And so we actually, on some levels, you can see that this would be something that's almost makif and something that we can't see, because if the Ein Sof was in the place of the finite, you would think that the finite would disappear. But the chiddush is that the finite doesn't disappear. The finite is able to stay right there where it is, and the Ein Sof quality is able to sit in it as it is and not be, so to speak, contained and condensed by this finite reality. It's not 100% revealed, but he actually shows that it sort of is revealed. In a certain sense, you can see that it's revealed. He says, because there's no end to the number. This is one of the examples that he gives over there. But he says there's no end to the number of things. And the fact of the matter is, if this is such a finite world, show me where it ends, right? And the truth is, the deeper they look, they used to think it ended. There was this idea of, Newtonian notion of determinism, whatever, all the philosophers over here, they used to think that if we just count enough things, we'll figure out where everything is, and we'll be able to determine the future, the past, the present. We'll just work it out. And as the science developed, they realized the more they look, the deeper it gets, and the more pieces there are, and there's no end in sight. Every time they find something smaller. And he even says over there, even the number of species really has no end. You think it has an end. You think you can go and count up all the number of species. But somehow there's going to be another one and more. And he says there's evidence in our world that the Or Ein Sof is actually here. Right? Because that's the whole Indian of the Or Ein Sof. There's no matter where you go, the most lowest possible place you can go, it's there. And there's even a little bit of evidence that it's there. The point is, of course, that not just that there's evidence that it's there, but that you can actually access it. And from the place of your finite scenario, there's ways of essentially bittling yourself, whatever that means. I don't know if to try it home or not try it at home, but if you get to some kind of a state of a bittled consciousness, then the place of the Or Ein Sof, which is in where you are, can actually shine out of your body. This is like what we call Moshe Rabbeinu. He's like a neshama of Atzilus standing in this world, or really it's every Sefer Torah, and in a certain sense every Yid. It's just that we have cloaks and masks of consciousness, of yeshus, and the feeling of self. If somehow we would do the avoda, or had a choice souls that were able to sort of, slice through all the nonsense, or through deep hisboneness, in the place where you are, it could actually be sort of emerge the reality that's underlying the very place where you are, which is the Ein Sof, because it's lamata mata arin tachlis, and there's no place that it's not. Question is if it's revealed, or how it's revealed, or there's signs of it, or so forth and so on. Yeah. What's that? If you're asking that, you're closer to the Or Ein Sof than I am. It's good. No, so we're 3 lines down from page 146. 4 lines down.
Which column? 3 lines down from the beginning.
4 lines down from page 146. You're using a different copy than everyone? I cannot be responsible for you, my friend. You're on your own. Shezeh mora al godel ha'inyan. Right? The fact that it comes down as is, in a state of Or Ein Sof, all the way into no matter what tachton you can find, this shows on its awesomeness, that really its being unlimited is so complete that no limitation can stand in its way and make it not be in a place. Fine. That was quick, right? But after, in the Mimer, it's not so quick. There's a few chapters on describing this. But then after he explains what's called the Or that's lamata ad in tachlis, he starts to explain the Or that's lamaila ad in kates, has no end up, on the up direction, which is even quote unquote higher and a more godly wonder than the light that we just described, which is the infinite light that can be found in every place. right? And achrei zeh masayim shezeu inyan ha'otzar. And then he concludes and says, and that higher light, that's what we mean. We say the king is willing to pull out the unseen, hidden storehouses from all generations that no eye has ever seen, and basically give them to the simple people. That's what it is. It's the Orein Sof that's Lamayla Mayla Adin Kates.
Adin Kates, it's Lamala. Ad in Tachlit.
Yeah. Not a small amount of ink is spilled over that distinction. There's that's like you could sit on these things for pages and pages and pages and pages of meditation, which are in extent in the Sfarim. Shafilu Inyan Zeh. In other words, if you come maybe in the morning class, we're gonna get into it. Even in Basi Lagani is a very detailed conversation about it, but it goes on and on in many places. Shafilu Inyan Zeh nostim la'anshe atzava. So even this hidden higher light, that's what's given, and in a way of wastefulness, to not only the generals and the tzaddikim and the masters of the universe, but even to the simple Jews, when God needs to win his war, when he calls us Tzivos Hashem. It's not accidental, of course, that the Rabbi created what's called Tzivos Hashem, the army of Hashem, which is all the children of Israel. He wanted them to join, like the camp or whatever, like the program called Tzivos Hashem. I'm sure you've all heard of it, right? It's not accidental. People said, how are you gonna make a children's program called the Warriors of God? Like I thought we're sort of a peaceful nation. But it's all based on Basi Lagani, that we should raise children already from the youngest age to know that when they do mitzvahs, they're going to go up in rank and they're going to be a general, they're going to be the Rebbe's army. He's trying to impress upon an entire generation from birth, basically, that we are the generation that's going to win the war. Like we are warriors and we're going to get the greatest secrets and the treasure of the empire put into our hands, which has never been done before to any other generation. Uniquely, we're called Tzivos Hashem. Just like the Jewish people that came out of Mitzrayim, so too in the end of days, there's going to be another exodus, the final exodus, and that is us. And he's told us that in many, many different ways and very often. Therefore, he literally calls us by the name of those Jews that came out of Mitzrayim. Below Rak Nesina Stam, he doesn't just give this treasure to the soldiers, he gives it in a flaunting way, where there's just photocopies everywhere and they're flying all over the place. This is it, by the way. This is the secrets of God's secret kingdom, is the treasures of Chassidus. This is what has never been seen, not shown to the greatest people throughout all the history. Finally, it not only comes out, it comes out in a way of wastefulness upon every man, woman, and child, goyim, whoever wants it, because the time the Jewish people to win the war, he's pulling out all the stops. Bees, booze.
Booze and bees.
Where am I? Shemizeh gufa muvan ad kama inyan hanitzachon nogea lamelech atzmo. And from this we can understand itself just how important it is, the victory to the king, if he's willing to flaunt and waste and give out the greatest treasures and the whole maximum power of what's driving the whole kingdom. And then we'll start tomorrow, but basically we're going to get a good start tomorrow. We'll slow down and chill out a little bit because we caught up to ourselves. And he says now in chapter 2, Maschil levaer beperek chamishasar. Now he's going to begin to explain the 15th chapter. So from now on, we're basically caught up with the year that we're in. And what is the whole chapter based on? This last sentence, and we'll call it a day. Hine kashem sha'orein sofu lamata mata bispashtus v'gili ad ein shiur umispar klal. Just like the Orein Sof goes down and expresses itself and reveals itself with no measure and no number at all. Kamo kain hu Orein Sof lamayla mayla ad ein kates. So too is the Orein Sof above. And now he starts to add the definition of what it means to be the Orein Sof going in the up direction. He says, how do you define it? Bebechinas helem haor. It's very interesting. It's sort of not what you would have thought. That how do you describe the Orein Sof that's going lamayla in how concealed Hashem can be? Shu behelem acher helem ubeiloi acher iloi. And this is the exact opposite. What did we say before? That no matter how low you are, the infinite light will find itself exactly where you are and you can't stop it from being there. But now we're saying, no matter how high your existence is, there's a light which defies you. So no matter how high you're going to go, and no matter the infinite universe is inside before that seems from, no matter what kind of concept you can think of, Hashem can outdo you in that you cannot know Him. And so if the Or Ein Sof that's Lamaila Maila is something that's like going sort of the other way, it's going inside of God, that it's untraceable, unknowable, anything that could possibly be in a state of knowledge. Hashem says, watch this, and He goes, Lamaila Arin Kates. So it's defined by its concealment. That's what shows on its like peak highness that no one can ever know it. It goes level after level of concealment. Bechinas Hedra Or, the Hedra Giloy, absence of light, absence of revelations, and yet this is called the Or Ein Sof. But it's even a deeper level of the Or Ein Sof because it's pashut unknowable. It's not that the infinite light can go and find itself everywhere. That's already a mamash, a wondrous nace. It's that no matter where you are, you're never going to get to it. And we'll pick it up tomorrow. Hashem. What's that? We're happy with that because He gives it to us.